Hi everyone, my name's John. Welcome back to my channel. As you know, I am one of the co-hosts of an event called Historathon. It's an ongoing event. It started last year in 2023 in January, and I hope it goes on for, well, ever, because it's really something I've poured a lot of my reading time and reading effort into over the last 21 months, and I love it so much. And because I love it so much, and also because I'm a co-host, I have to share my pile of possibilities that I'm going to hopefully pull from to some extent. And mostly, what I'd like to open every video with is this is mostly a pile of possibilities for people that want possibilities. I want to read at least 2 or 3 of these, but I haven't made any obligations but one. So sometimes I just see something on my bookshelf and it's random and I pull it off and want to read that instead. But here are 10 books. I wanted to limit myself so these videos don't become too unwieldy to 10 books that cover the period that we read about in the last 3 months of Historathon, which would be 1820 to the present day. First book is published by Verso Press, which I have mentioned several times on this channel, right there. This is by Enzo Traverso. It is Revolution, an Intellectual History. None of these books I have read, so I will be pulling sometimes from the inside flaps. Some of them I know a little bit more about than others. And I'll read you the inside front cover of this. Walter Benjamin compared revolution to nuclear fission, a blast capable of liberating and multiplying the energies contained in the past. This book does not tell the history of revolutions in chronological sequence. It interprets them as collective eruptions that destroy the established order and open new horizons of expectation. These factories, they are factories of utopia. Enzo Traverso rehabilitates the concept of revolution as a key to understanding our modernity, not only its social and political structures, but also its ideas and collective imagination, even its aesthetic forms. This means apprehending revolution's intellectual and emotional dimensions, which are deposited in texts and images, theories and experiences, material heritages, and collective memories. So that's just the first paragraph. I think that sort of gives an idea. I won't drag you through the whole rigmarole. But a book about the ideas that drive revolutions. Revolution and Intellectual History by Enzo Traverso. Next, something I promised Princeton that I would review. I've been really remiss in keeping up my promises of talking about the books that they've sent me this year, but I want to read this. It is short enough to read. This is on the order of 190 pages or so. I should have plenty of time to read this. Okay, maybe more like 210 or something. But this is The Mind in Exile, Tom Schmann in Princeton by Stanley Korngold. So from Princeton there. And this is about how long did he spend in the United States? About a dozen years, I think. 14 years. He came to the United States exactly a year before World War II broke out in September of 1938, and wrote one of the novels from the Joseph Brothers Quartet, and had a lot of political realizations. And this visit to the United States, it's more than a visit, it was 14 years long, ended up contributing to a really interesting political shift that he had. As a young man, he was a sort of European arch-conservative, really. And by the time he had left Germany, he was a liberal through and through. Liberal in the old sense of the word, sort of a laissez-faire, uh, anti-Hitler, certainly liberal, who thought that democracy and freedom were important to society, not only for art, but just for how society worked. And I hope what this book does is sort of trace that political development and not just be a retelling of the 14 years of his life that he spent in the United States. But I'm looking forward to this, and hopefully I will carve out time to read it. Okay, speaking of fascism, I should really take this label off. These big garish labels. This is by Lucy Hughes Hallett, who is sort of a public historian in England. One of her other books almost made this list too, called Hero Worship. This is a biography of Gabriele D'Annunzio, poet, seducer, and preacher of war. This came out about a dozen years ago or so, and it is a biography of D'Annunzio, who was an orator, one of the first people to really harness the power of the radio to promulgate his political ideas, which were explicitly pro-fascist. He died in a couple of years before World War II broke out, but he was just a really interesting character that I don't know too much about, other than the fact that the politics thing, I couldn't tell you too much about his poetry. But I also have never read anything by Lucy Hughes Hallett either. So let's do the first two paragraphs of the inside cover. Daring night flight missions, dropping bombs and propaganda out of early airplanes, bloodthirsty orations inciting a people to war, trysts with countless women, including the great actress Eleonora Duse, writing books and plays that moved thousands of young men to begin to dress, smoke, speak, and walk like fictional characters, the creation of a Dionysian paradise with pleasure and literature at its heart. Here is Lucy Hughes Hallett's volatile and fascinating life of Gabriele D'Annunzio, the poet, bon vivant, and virulent nationalist who prefigured Mussolini and the rise of Italian fascism. Gabriele D'Annunzio was Italy's premier poet at a time when poetry mattered enough to trigger riots. A brilliant self-publicist in the first age of mass media, he used his fame to sell his work, seduce women, and promote his extreme nationalism. In 1915, D'Annunzio's incendiary oratory helped drive Italy into the First World War, in which he achieved heroic status as an aviator. So, a biography of Gabriele D'Annunzio. All right. More World War I stuff, to the extent that that is World War I stuff. I came across this at a Friends of the Library sale for $1, and now when I get online and look for it, it's $40 or $50. This comes from Harvard University Press and was published quite a while ago, but looks like it is kind of up my alley, being more cultural, intellectual history of ideas type stuff instead of a military history. This is the generation of 1914, which is history of the ideas and influences that World War II had on the people who lived through it and participated in it. There is a sort of a longer blurb from The Listener, a publication I'm not familiar with, but although so different in subject and approach, the originality and absorbing freshness with which the study is written creates something of the excitement which one felt when one discovered Edmund Wilson's To the Finland Station or J.L. Lowes's The Road to Xanadu. It tells how, around 1880, all over Europe and in Britain, the word generation ceased to mean what it had done for centuries and came to mean youth and its special values, energies, repudiations, and abilities. According to the myth, this generation had no sooner shown itself full of a promise than it got lost, the lost generation, in the Flanders mud bath prepared for it by wily old men and women. Mr. Wool, the author is Robert Wool, by the way. Mr. Wool gives a tart synopsis of this romantic simplification and provides us with an altogether nobler, often absurd and dangerous, and finally more enthralling scene. So, I looked in here, and Ortega y Gasset is mentioned, and D'Annunzio even gets a couple of mentions too. So, not a big time investment, would like to make time for this eventually. There used to be a time when, was it, I forgot which book site it was. I want to say betterworldbooks.com used to have really, really great sales. And you could buy books. Many of them were library pulls, so they have the sort of the apparatus, the sort of all the marks of a library book. But for something like $4 or $5 plus shipping, and this was probably 6 or 8 years ago. Excuse me, but I took advantage of that when I could, and this is one of the books I got back then. This is Emerson. Excuse the glare. Tried to create some natural light in this room, and this is the price I pay for it. Emerson, The Mind on Fire, by Robert D. Richardson, Jr. And Richardson also wrote a biography of Thoreau, which, interestingly enough, is the book that brought him and his wife together. His wife being, Richardson had since passed away, but his wife was Annie Dillard. Annie Dillard wrote a letter to him about his Thoreau biography, not this one, but the Thoreau biography. Said she loved it and was a fan and would love to meet him, and then they ended up getting married and staying married for over 30 years until he passed away a few years ago. But this is supposed to be, I wouldn't know because I haven't read it, but supposed to be a fantastic biography of Emerson, and the Thoreau bio is supposed to be really great too. I read 3 or 4 years ago a biography of Thoreau by a new one that was sent to me. I'm forgetting the author's name. I will try to put it in the comments if I remember. Which I read in a Voxer group with some other friends, including Hannah from Hannah's Books. And I think we all loved that book. It was absolutely spectacular. So I've sort of been yearning for some more American transcendentalism. And I've noticed I've pulled a few biographies. So the next 2 will be biographies. This is Edward Rice's biography of Richard Francis Burton. This is Captain Sir Richard Francis Burton, another book I've had on my bookshelf for a while. This is, let me get you the full subtitle: The Secret Agent Who Made the Pilgrimage to Mecca, Discovered the Kama Sutra, and Brought the Arabian Nights to the West. So he was a traveler. He went to several regions of Africa, went to India, if I'm not mistaken. He was a philologist, a translator, a pretty notorious rake and Lothario. I will read you the back. Fierce, magnetic, and brilliant with his dashing looks and battle-scarred brow, Captain Richard Francis Burton, who lived from 1821 to 1890, accomplished in real life the stuff of legend. In this engrossing book, 10 Years in the Making, Edward Rice retraces Burton's steps through India, the Near East, and Africa, and tells the dramatic and compelling story of Burton's many astonishing feats. We learn that Burton was one of the first Europeans to seek the source of the Nile, and that, disguised, he ventured into the forbidden cities of Mecca and Medina, risking death if he had been discovered. Edward Rice also uncovers Burton's formidable intellectual curiosity and his impressive literary accomplishments, from his discovery and translation of the Kama Sutra to his 17-volume translation of the Arabian Nights. Famous across the globe for his various appetite for women life and forbidden knowledge, Burton scandalized the Victorian age and continues to amaze and electrify. I've also heard amazing things about this one. So, just another person I could tell you just maybe 1 or 2 minutes worth of information about without staring at the back of the book, but who I want to learn more about nevertheless. All right, that's book number 6, One More Biography. This is also from Verso Press. I promise I'm not trying to influence anyone's politics or anything. Verso, if you're familiar with them, is a press that publishes stuff that is on the left to some degree, sometimes socialist, sometimes Marxist, sometimes Trotskyite, sometimes Leninist. In this version, he was a Trotskyite. I don't know about the author of the book itself, but C.L.R. James certainly was a Trotskyite and a Marxist. C.L.R. James, The Artist as Revolutionary by Paul Buell. This came out in the late 80s originally and was republished by Verso. He's probably best known, C.L.R. James, for a book that he wrote back in 1938 called The Black Jacobins, which is about Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution. C.L.R. James was a man of prodigious and varied accomplishments. He was a protean 20th century Marxist intellectual, widely recognized as a pioneering scholar of slave revolt, a leading voice of Pan-Africanism, a peripatetic revolutionary and scholar active in the US and UK radical movements, a novelist, playwright, and critic, and one of the premier writers on cricket and sports. This intellectual portrait was written by James's longtime interlocutor and comrade Paul Buell and initially published in 1988. With a new final chapter, updated bibliography, a new foreword by historian Robin D.G. Kelly, and a new afterword by Paul Buell, and the philosopher Lawrence Ware, this is a edition of a classic biography will be a key resource in the James revival. He's one of the central figures, James is, of post-colonial history, post-colonial thought. So, there you go. C.L.R. James, The Artist is Revolutionary by Paul Buell. Now, my 3 last books won't be biographies, but we have one more book about Africa, and then 2 more books that aren't. So, this is How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. Walter Rodney was a writer, a speaker, an activist, and this is probably his most famous book, also coming out of Verso Press, by the way, and tells the story about how policies that were made in the Anglophone world, some of which was in Europe. I guess it's mostly Europe. I haven't read the book, like I said, but I can't imagine that it was just European powers who had a say in this. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa is an ambitious masterwork of political economy, detailing the impact of slavery and colonialism on the history of international capitalism. In this classic book, Rodney makes the unflinching case that African poverty is not a natural feature of geography or a consequence of culture, but a direct product of imperial extraction from a continent, a practice, a practice that continues into the present. Those aren't quotation marks, that's dirt on my book. A direct product of imperial extraction from a continent, a practice that continues into the present. Meticulously researched, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa remains an unshakably relevant study of the so-called Great Divergence between Africa and Europe, just as it remains a prescient resource for grasping the surge in global inequality today. Verso has published several of Walter Rodney's books. Unfortunately, Rodney died at a very, very young age. I don't think he was even 40. It's unclear who did it, but someone put a car bomb in his car one day in 1980, and that was the end of Walter Rodney. Almost certainly for political reasons, but there are different ideas about who may have done it. But check out Verso if you're interested in Rodney's stuff, or a variety of other sort of post-colonial African thinkers, or writers who wrote about Africa. Next up is a book that I have promised I would read with another Voxer group. We're going to read this, let's see, the same person I read The Ideological Origins of the American Revolution with, Brendan Grusso, and Justin from Triumphal Reads, and Angie, who is a frequent commenter on these videos. We're going to try to plow our way through Christopher Clark's latest book. I think this came out in 2022 or 3. And I sent off to Crown for a copy of this, and they were so kind as to reply. I said, if you would send me a free copy of this, I promise I will write a review of it and send it to you. And they agreed, and it showed up on my doorstep one day. This is Revolutionary Spring, Europe Aflame, and the Fight for a New World, 1848 to 1849 by Christopher Clark, the same guy who wrote The Sleepwalkers, A History of World War I. And I have read one book before about the 1848 revolutions. It was such a snooze fest, unfortunately, because it really sounds like a fascinating period in European history, but the writing was just, and the history too, quite frankly, was not very compelling. But I haven't read The Sleepwalkers, also by Christopher Clark, but I'm hoping that this will be able to be a little bit more interesting and maybe give some of the social culture, the kinds of history I like. It doesn't look like it's a military history, so that's good. Already off to a strong start there. But this is Revolutionary Spring by Christopher Clark. And a last book is a book in the other sense. It's essays, interrelated essays on mostly 18th and 19th century history of ideas. So Princeton University Press, which is the press that put this out, has, over the past several years, come out with pretty much everything Isaiah Berlin has ever put to paper. And this is, and I have bought, I think, pretty much all of them when Princeton has their big yearly sales. Because books like this for, $5 or $6, they're really hard to pass up. And this is one of those volumes. They're all sort of like this. They're just different colors. Not all of them are yellow. But most of them have a sort of a caricature of Berlin on them. This is Against the Current by Isaiah Berlin, with a foreword by Mark Lula. And I'll just show you some of the, see how many essays do we have here. About 12 or 13 essays. Everything from the Counter-Enlightenment, the originality of Machiavelli, the divorce between the sciences and the humanities, Giambattista Vico's concept of knowledge, a 40-page essay on Montesquieu, Herzen and his memoirs, the Naivete of Verdi, an essay on George Sorel, and an essay on nationalism, past neglect and present power. So Berlin's wheelhouse was 18th and 19th century ideas, and especially political ideas. So that's what he's writing about here. In this outstanding collection of essays, Isaiah Berlin, that is, by the way, the way he pronounced his name, in case you're curious. We usually say Isaiah Bernal, but apparently it was Isaiah. One of the great thinkers of the 20th century, discusses the importance of dissenters in the history of ideas, among them Machiavelli, Vico, Montesquieu, Herzl, and Sorel. With his unusual powers of imaginative recreation, Berlin brings to life original minds that swam against the current of their times and still challenge conventional wisdom. So, there you go. My last book of a pile of possibilities for Q3 of Historathon. And I will be back soon with, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had our first, I guess it wasn't quite autumn then, but it wasn't even beginning to feel like autumn, to be quite honest. But we had a library sale in which I picked up 7 or 8 books, and I want to show those to you before we have our next big sale, which is the week after next, on Thursday, on, it's 12 days from today, whatever that would be. And I'm inevitably probably going to come back home with 20 or 30 books from that sale, like I have for the past couple of years. So I want to clear off all of the books from my dinner table, which I've been wanting to show, and talk about those, and then make more room for the room those are probably going to take up. So that'll be a shorter video, but look forward to the bigger sale. I'll post those as soon as I have the courage to turn on a webcam and make another video of 20 or 30 books. But there's always inevitably some really, really great stuff that comes out of that sale. So I will be back with that video soon. But before that, yes, these, there we go, right there, those books. I will talk about some of those next. They've been piling up for a couple of months. So it's 29 minutes, and that's too much of your time. I'll talk to you later. Bye.